All right, thank you very much, Peace. Um, okay, so that was a very, very interesting session taken by Ignacy, and we'll be moving on to our next speaker, who is Radhika, and she's a founding partner at StarChain Ventures. Radhika is an AI and Web3 venture operator and advisor, a top 100 Women of the Future 2022, TEDx speaker, Silicon Valley Woman of Influence, and SV serial entrepreneur. She's a founding partner at Stars Chain Ventures, a Silicon Valley based venture studio solving significant global challenges with advanced technology, a core thesis of our best selling book, Enterprise Blockchain Has Arrived, co authored by Jordan Woods. With over a decade of experience strategically advising startups, Radhika has enabled top startups to raise over $900 million to achieve successful exits, that's IPO or acquisition by brands, and become unicorns, generating $4 billion plus in shareholder value. That is very huge. So Radhika has also works at the intersection of technology and policy to develop impactful frameworks. Radhika is a board member at industry organizations such as Partners in Digital Health Institute, PhD Inst, and Blockchain in Healthcare Today, VHTY. Radhika has an MBA from Chapman University, AB from Bryn Mawr University College, and is a certified network engineer. So we're super, super excited to have you, Radhika.
Thank you
I'll
so
pass the
much.
word.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Great to be here with you. Peace, thanks for the invitation to join you today as well. Yeah, happy to be here. And I wanted to also mention that a lot of these really exciting topics in the energy sector are things we wrote about in our books. I'll probably share a little bit more about those views on the panel with Ignacy and Jürgen. But I wanted to share with you my presentation today on fundraising insights. So I won't get into my background since I was introduced so beautifully by you. It's just a great pleasure to be here with all of you and to share some of my thoughts. And since I work in the venture space, I thought it would be a very good opportunity to share some of the insights. Some of these insights are going to be familiar to you since you've taken our course on Insider's Guide to Fundraising. But I'll take that away. So a lot of the thoughts that I'm going to be sharing later on the panel are based on our book, along with my colleague Jordan Woods. We co-authored a book called Enterprise Blockchain Has Arrived, which really is all about Web3. And it is about digital infrastructures that can be completely transformed using blockchain technology as a core. We do discuss how this technology combined with AI, IoT, really it's the convergence of advanced technologies to give us greater agency and control over data. Ignacy, you mentioned some very interesting points about data and how important it is to preserve that integrity around data. So this is something we're passionate about as well. So it's great to see your interest in that arena. So what I'd like to share is really the whole process of fundraising. I mean, it's a bit of a science and it's a bit of an art, but the science part is very, very strategic. And so if you think about doing anything, you really want to approach it from a strategic consideration. This is not about going out to everybody and saying, oh, something will stick. So really the whole purpose behind doing things strategically is to minimize bumps along the road. So, what investors look for essentially is a high growth space. You don't want to make investments in an area that's declining or stagnating. So the first thing that an investor will think about is, are you in a high growth space? And the good news is for everyone involved in the energy sector, it is a high growth space. It is something that is really necessary for the planet. And so there is going to be a heightened interest especially with investors who are investing in areas such as sustainability and climate. This is going to be a great area of interest. in general, what you want to think about as an entrepreneur is setting your growth targets at, let's say, 100 million over 5 years. That might seem like a very, very large number, but really the idea is that as an entrepreneur, you're thinking about how to deploy a technology solution out there that is going to generate tremendous revenue growth very rapidly. So this is not about something that's going to take a long time to build. There are some infrastructure kinds of projects that might take longer than that. But typically, when you think about, when you, especially in the world of software, things can be deployed. And these days, with the advent of AI, the time to market, the time to release projects is that much made more efficiently. And therefore, we're going to see these timelines shorten and shorten as we move forward. The idea is that, when you are an entrepreneur and you're talking with an investor, keep in mind that you're really selling a piece of your company, right? So this is not about just getting money. The money is an exchange for something. And so the exchange is that you're really giving part of the ownership of your company to investors. So that's something I want you to keep in mind because it's easy to lose sight of that. The next thing is, of course, that everybody's going to be interested, or investors are going to be thinking about product MVPs. An MVP is a minimum viable product. So many of you might have heard that term. And that's really just a basic version of the product that you can actually start implementing out in the marketplace. And the way you can prove how successful you're going to be is usually by way of proving that you have some sense of customer traction or adoption. And typically, even early in the process, you might be able to obtain letters of intent or LOIs. And that's a good evidence or indication that there is demand for what you're building and that there's customer interest in what you're developing. And the last thing that I will say, among other considerations, is investors will look for entrepreneurs that have deep sector expertise or domain expertise. And certainly in the case of the climate area or sustainability, these are very specialized areas, right? And so investors are going to look for the deep domain or sector expertise that the team can bring. Let's see here. So as you might imagine, when you look at the global investment landscape, there's a lot that needs to be done in Africa. It is starting, and that's what's exciting. I personally grew up in North Africa, so part of me is always belongs to Africa, and I think that it presents such an incredible field of opportunity, and it's a large continent, so there's a great deal to be done. But when you look at the investment landscape, really the centers are still in North America. The centers are typically in the US. And a lot of that comes from Silicon Valley, where I happen to be based. And so still, when you look at, the venture capital landscape, the large quantity of investment is really only available in Silicon Valley. And that's why many of big companies come here. You're talking just, trillions of dollars really available here. Certainly billions of dollars. So, what are some of the things that investors look at when you look at early stage companies? We're really looking for exit potential rather than profit sharing. In many parts of the world, this is where the way we do things in North America is a little bit different from other parts of the world. In many parts of the world, investors might look at profit sharing. Typically in the United States, investors are doing this. They are financial professionals. They are specialized in these areas. And they're not really looking for profit sharing. They are looking for exit potential. What do I mean by that? An exit is when a company either goes IPO or has an offering on the public markets. That's the initial public offering. And the other opportunity is to be either merged or acquired with another company. So that's something that I want to keep you apprised of, is what is the exit potential for this company? When you have a venture fund, really you're looking at each company that you're looking and evaluating for investment, as the basic question is this a company that is going to have an exit, and particularly a significant exit? Because obviously this is all about making money. You want to think about, as an entrepreneur, how do you maximize the return to general partners and limited partners? So if you think about the structure of an investment firm, the general partners are the people who are running the firm, and then the limited partners are the people that are investing in these funds. And so every general partner is thinking, how do I make money for the limited partner who has invested in my fund? So it's a trickle down in a sense. So for you as an entrepreneur, you need to be thinking about, well, am I providing the kind of return to these investors who also have their investors to provide returns to? So this is really the mindset that I want you to be thinking about. There's a lot of similarities to horse racing in a way, strangely enough. Think about placing bets on something, and really the investor is thinking, is this a company that I can place a bet on? And is this worthy of my investment bet? Because what I'm looking for as an investor is going to be, well, is this company going to have an exit? Is there a potential to make great return on my investment? These are the kinds of questions the investor is thinking about. And what you want to highlight to any investors is what your accomplishments are as from a team perspective, because as I mentioned, a lot of that is tied to domain and sector expertise, and certainly in the areas that we're talking about in climate and sustainability, it's a very specialized field, as I mentioned. So you want to demonstrate and showcase what accomplishments the team has, and also the network. And so why is the network important? Again, it is about how fast you can grow. Do you have a network of partners, of potential customers? How quickly will it be achieved in terms of traction in the marketplace? These are the questions that the investor is thinking about. And the real reason for asking any of and all of these questions is reducing risk of failure. So as you might imagine, when an investor is going to place a bet in a company or make that investment in a company, they're saying, well, what is the risk of failure here? And we often talk about investor mindsets through this process. And one of the biggest questions that the investor is trying to answer for themselves is, is the risk of the failure so big that it's going to prevent me from thinking about making an investment? So investors are more likely to think about ways to say no rather than ways to say yes. Obviously, if you meet an investor who's very excited in your specialized area, they might be less inclined to say no because they also are keen to see success in a domain or sector. But typically, investors are risk averse, if you can imagine it, because you would think, well, that's counterintuitive. They're making investments, and therefore they should have open minds in making bets. And they do have open minds in making bets, but it's also about minimizing the risk while you're placing these bets. And how do you do that? How do you demonstrate risk of failure? And these are a reducing risk of failure, that is. And so there's three major elements that you want to be thinking about. One is team, the other is market, and the last is product. In many parts of the world, investors will actually pay more attention to the product and the market than necessarily the team. Here in North America, and particularly in Silicon Valley, we place a greater emphasis on the team because the thinking is that market conditions can change, products can evolve, new technologies come on the horizon. And so a good team, an A+ team, will really be the kind of team that can weather the storms, that can resolve things strategically and dynamically to move through the opportunities and overcome obstacles. And that's really a team play. So we really look at the quality of the team, the ability of the team to leverage their particular domain or sector expertise, and how that will translate to reducing risk of failure, because the risk of failure is very, very high. And so any of these ventures are going to be very high risk, and the investor is looking at how the team is going to de-risk the opportunity. The next is market. As I mentioned to you, investors are looking at high growth spaces. They want markets that are growing at CAGRs, or compound annual growth rates, that are in the double digits. They want to see opportunities that are expanding in a particular sector rather than a stagnating or declining market. And then lastly, product. Are you developing a product competitively that it will hold up to the competition? Are you developing that competitive moat around your product, particularly in terms of technology proofing what you're doing so that it stands the test of time? In conservative times, a lot of these goalposts are going to be moved further out. So they're going to ask you to demonstrate greater customer traction and greater adoption or evidence of greater customer adoption in your product. And so, these are pretty conservative times at the moment when we have tremendous geopolitical tensions going on worldwide. A lot of investors want to play a wait and see sort of game and say, well, I'm going to wait and see how this turns out, and not really sure that I'm going to be ready to deploy capital anytime soon. So, in conservative times, you want to be sensitive to the mindset of the investor who is going to be thinking even more so about the risk of failure. And the last thing is that VCs tend to be very fashion conscious. There are things that are in vogue at times and then out of fashion as well. So particular technologies that are coming at the forefront, AI, for example, is basically absorbing all of the oxygen in the space. In nearly every company we're meeting is AI something or other. And we at StarChain Ventures also look at AI as a foundational technology. We also look at other technologies such as blockchain, for example. And then, of course, there are certain sectors that either come into favor or out of favor. And, for those people, for those investors who are very passionate about climate technology, about sustainability, obviously the areas that you are talking about in this conference are incredibly important for them. So you will want to think about which VCs are going to be more interested in your space than others. How do you attract investor interest? Really, it comes down to having a very well thought out, put together package that includes some key materials. So you want to think about an elevator pitch. So this is a short 60 to 90 pitch. Imagine meeting an investor in an elevator. You don't have that much time. What kinds of information would you want to translate across if that investor says, well, what do you do? What's your company all about? You want to have a well thought out, 60 to 90 second sort of pitch that explains very quickly the area that you're in, your passion for working on this, and what kind of traction or merits do you have attached to this venture. You also want to have something of like an introductory paragraph or two, something that very quickly highlights the essential elements for your company. And again, demonstrates how you're really getting ahead of the curve, how you're developing customer adoption with the product that you have, and of course, your team. What kind of team do you have, and what are the strengths of the team? Really, what you're trying to do through any of these materials, and certainly, of course, the investor presentation itself, is to build credibility around your team, around the market that you're in, and that it is high growth, and also, of course, the product that you're building and the competitive strengths of the product and the differentiation you have for your product with respect to other companies out there in the market. And lastly, what you want to think about is references. References not just for you personally, because obviously character references are incredibly important, but also company references, product references. If you have a product out there and a customer is using it, an investor will be very keen to understand, are these referenceable customers? Is that the type of customer they can easily call and do a reference call with this customer and saying, well, what do you think about the product? What do you think about the team? How easy has it been to work with this team? Do you think that this is the kind of thing that you'll be using for a long time? All of these are questions that the investor is going to be thinking about and wanting to be answered. So having great solid references is something that just builds your credibility out there with the investors. And the final thing that I want to leave you with is the whole presentation that you develop really has to hang together like an interesting story, a compelling story, a memorable story even. So at the end of the day, I mean, investors come across so many different opportunities. And the idea is that you want to differentiate yourself as much as possible from other companies that are out there also wanting mind share from the same investor. So when you have a compelling story that hangs together it really demonstrates not only your passion for why you're doing this, but how you're doing this and how you're doing it better than anyone else. That's the kind of story that will be compelling and that will be memorable in an investor's mind. And that's, at the end of the day, you want to be memorable in a good way. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. I'll stop sharing screen at the moment and leave the door open for a few questions. Peace, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Radhika. Really appreciate your expansive insights, right? Thanks so much for that.